With Torghast becoming one of the most anticipated features coming for Shadowlands, gaining huge popularity and excitement, it was about time to add a feature to it that caused huge backlash and turned it all into Warfronts 2.0. Let's talk about Torments. Follow my Twitch, you animals! Since I love this feature, and I save a ton of extra time every day by not needing to fix my hair, ever, I've had the opportunity to play Torghast probably more than anyone at this point. As a foundation, I've completed what used to be called Heroic and its updated equivalent on all currently available specs. None of that cutesy low floor play, so I have a pretty solid grasp on what to expect in the tower. Now that I've stroked my own EP to a satisfactory eye level, let's briefly introduce what Torghast is. Torghast is a 42-year-old man from Delaware who now works in a medium-sized accounting firm after never realizing his dream of becoming a professional Warcraft player. He and his wife have 2 ugly kids, and his hobbies include... I've been working on a larger video for Torghast that is meant to release with Shadowlands sometime in Q4 2025. While most people know about Torghast already, some troglodytes like this guy still need to be informed. Torghast is Blizzard's first take on a roguelike-inspired WoW experience similar to other games like Bindings of Isaac and Darkest Dungeon. There's even some further inspiration from some dungeon crawler games that loosely resemble roguelikes. So for those of you that have hit gaming rock bottom and are currently playing Diablo 3,
they ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
You'll recognize some similarities in there like floor progression difficulty and synergized builds leading to bonkers levels of power and fun. Initial Torghast reception has been largely positive, with tons of user feedback going in to make the experience better and ensure it has longevity. The devs have released some great updates to the system along with an increasing number of classes and specs, and a lot of them have been a ton of fun, and then the Fire Nation attacked. Blizzard advertised the game mode to have no timers or ramping pressure involved with the run, encouraging players to take their time exploring, strategizing for the difficult pulls on higher floors, and enjoying the experience at their own pace. While this likely remained the case for a while, things have changed recently as it was noted that players on high floors would sit around waiting for cooldowns to come up for the more difficult pulls and mobs. The developers don't like this, and truthfully, it isn't particularly fun, as it promotes a style of play that is now known as degenerate. To try and stop you from being naughty, Torments were introduced recently at floors 13 and above. These are designed to discourage waiting around for long periods of time for cooldowns to come up. However, these didn't succeed at all, and added a layer of irritation to the otherwise fun Torghast experience that just doesn't belong. Since then, there have been more complaints about Torments in the past 2 days than OnlyFans accounts created in the past 2 months. So now, let's look at the 6 Torments that were added. Might of the Upper Reaches increases your physical damage taken by a certain percent every 60 seconds. Similarly, Mortregar's Echoes increases your magic damage taken by a certain percent every 60 seconds. Breath of Coldheart decreases your damage done by a certain percent every 120 seconds. Fracturing Forces spawns a Shadestalker, which is a rogue-type mob to randomly attack you when you're not in combat and ruin your day, much like actual rogues when you're just trying to do your dailies. Likewise, Eye of Skoldus spawns 2 doggo mobs to attack you randomly when you're not in combat. And finally, the only acceptable one, Soulforge Heat, just does low periodic fire damage to you with no ramping effect the higher you go. All of these effects are reset per floor, but have a higher ramp value the higher you go, until you're introduced to a new Torment, which happens every 6 floors. At that point, the previous Torment ramp value remains capped, but it is there for the rest of the run, while the new Torment ramps up for its respective 6 floors. This creates a compounding effect for your 18-floor total run. It's important to check the context outlined by Blizzard for these Torments and just what their goals are exactly. Since none of you can read or do simple tasks like find a PvP vendor, I'll break it down for you. They divide it into 2 sections saying what Torments should and shouldn't do. Basically, Torments should prevent you from sitting around waiting for your CDs every pull, but what they shouldn't do is make Torghast into a fast-paced, time-constrained feature, prevent you from taking a break whenever you need one, intimidate casual players from playing Torghast altogether, or just make things not fun. Okay, I may have added that last one myself, but that's because it's true so far. We already have the GCD issue, and that isn't fun. God, I hate the GCD thing. Like and subscribe if you hate the GCD changes too. While 3 of the above Torments, namely the time-based ones, do satisfy the application of pressure, they are too extreme with the current tuning. For example, I ran as efficiently as I could through a higher floor with no deaths, virtually no stopping or breaks, killing and looting everything, and still ended up with an increased 70% physical or magic damage taken by the end. This is a massive amount considering some of these mobs hit harder than when Fry's dog waited for him in Futurama and he never came. And what makes it worse is that this effect ramps up and pressures you for the duration of an entire floor rather than small instances of non-combat play. More importantly, all 6 Torments succeed in failing by fitting into the what Torments shouldn't do section. The 3 time-based ones certainly make you feel rushed. The two ad-based summon Torments do not pressure you in any way to pull faster, rather, they just annoy you with mobs that spawn way too frequently and prevent you from taking a break. And the final Torment is probably the best one because it doesn't do anything. It just pulses minor fire damage every 5 seconds. It certainly doesn't rush you, it doesn't prevent breaks, and it doesn't turn casual players off, but it also fails in that it doesn't stop you from AFKing for 10 minutes waiting for Bloodlust if you want to. Unfortunately, the first iteration and implementation of Torments was a spectacular failure, and a bigger miss than creating a community council on Twitch. While some of the above issues clearly just require some tuning, such as ramp frequency and ad spawn rate, there are some underlying meta issues that pose a larger conceptual problem to the existence of Torments. If Blizzard's goal is to punish long, non-combat stretches, the only realistic way to do that is to apply some type of ramping pressure or restriction. Even the sole existence of such a debuff or pressure creates a rushed mental state for most players, especially casual, rendering them incapable of taking their time to enjoy things, or even take a brief break. The only way to avoid that is to tune it so low, say 1% physical damage increase taken every 10 minutes, that you start to question, what is even the point of adding them then? Additions like ad spawns and non-ramping dots not only miss the mark by either preventing breaks or not forcing players to wait for CDs, but provide a nuisance in an already more complex and new experience filled with frequent difficulties and puzzles to overcome. We don't need affixes inside Torghast, or as my crumpets and tea brother so eloquently put it,
throw it in the bin.
A further problem is that Blizzard needs to make sure that player power-oriented rewards are still realistically attainable without barring them via some unnecessarily difficult torment. If they do add high-level vanity rewards, which they really should, it'll cause casual players to have to feel like they need to wait for their CDs as the only winning strategy to get these highly sought-after rewards, though all players will need to still play properly to even get past the high floors. One of the biggest issues here overall, though, is that these Torments are just largely not fun, and create a jarring experience in something that otherwise has been quite fantastic to play so far. And it's all about having fun, right? Right? While I do sympathize that the degenerate gameplay of waiting for CDs frequently is boring, pressuring players to pull faster is certainly the greater of two evils. Some of the reasonable suggestions that I've thought of or heard around the community include just tuning the current ones way lower, but that still has the issue of giving a rushed mental state to players. Another included limiting the amount of Bloodlust uses per floor. While not a horrible suggestion, Bloodlust is likely not the only cooldown that is under scrutiny for creating downtime. Where do we draw the line then? Is it okay for Havoc Demon Hunters to wait 4 minutes between every pull for meta? Is it okay for Unholy DKs to wait for army? Is it okay for people to even be playing a Shadow Priest? This solution has its benefits but provides a lot of gray zone. Except for Shadow Priest.
Throw it in the bin.
Another suggestion is to create pressure per instance of non-combat, rather than make it floor-wide. So the longer you're out of combat in one stretch, the more punishment applies. While this sounds great for all of you BDSM addicts, the counter is that players will just find ways to sit in combat and wait anyways. You can just crowd control a mob, get into combat with it and wait until you're ready, or even just pull some mobs and leash them to reset that theoretical out-of-combat timer. One of the best middle grounds I can think of is to follow a kill-based earning that many roguelikes follow, as it removes the main problem here. Time. The notion is that killing mobs will give your appropriate reward, which in this case is cooldown reduction. As a general basic example, imagine that the cooldown of Bloodlust wouldn't reduce via time at all, but every time you kill a mob on the floor, its cooldown is reduced by, say, 30 seconds. Unlike the disgusting combination of dipping french fries into shakes, this allows for a lovely coming together of both worlds where there's no rush or pressure on the floor, but you also don't benefit from idling for 10 minutes at a time waiting for all major cooldowns either. Furthermore, it could add another layer of strategy by dealing with mob kill orders so you can have the right CDs for the tougher mobs. This can also be easily incorporated with current cooldown reduction anima powers by changing some numbers, designs, which spells are affected, or limiting how many of them stack, amongst other simple solutions. While there's negatives on both sides of this overall Torment equation, potentially the other best suggestion I can think of is just, let's not. Just like let loot be loot, maybe we should just let cooldowns be cooldowns. There's already a plethora of difficulty and intricacy on higher runs in Torghast. The time needed to constantly wait for long cooldowns is a resource that many people already don't have, and for the no-life virgins, like myself, that do, well, much like a can of Axe body spray and some rehearsed pickup lines, it will only get them so far. Like other scaling difficulties, eventually you'll just hit something you can't kill regardless if you have all of your cooldowns available. I do appreciate that there are some outlying extreme cases where not applying a ramping pressure to some class anima combos will allow them to go too far. A good example is the mage anima power that makes their first iconic spec-based ability, while invisible, such as Frostbolt, do 2000% increased damage, and it stacks. Obviously then a mage can just wait for invisibility for every mob, one-shot it, and then leash the rest of the pack and rinse and repeat. Rather than apply system-wide ramping pressure, I'd much rather see the solution to an outlier like this be to simply limit this effect to a certain amount of uses per floor or per run. This would be similar to what we've already seen anyways from other high percent damage anima powers. The amount of complaint, tuning, resource investment, and other issues that arise from trying to solve this is just not worth it in my opinion, and you'll further risk alienating a likely much higher percentage of casual players wanting to enjoy Torghast at their pace just to try and slow down a quite small percentage of hardcore runners. I'm curious to see new ideas that the devs and our communities develop. Unless you play a gnome. Then you should probably just stay quiet. Well, that does it for me, and it sounds like the devs have their hands full and haven't yet found a good end to this problem, so I shouldn't be expected to give a good end to this video either.